from a foot wound, which heals very poorly, as you know, in people with diabetes. They get poor circulation, the nerves don't work so well anymore, so when they get a little wound, they don't feel it. This is the kind of x-ray that usually you would see in a 65-year-old person. 55-year-old, 45 starts to get young. 25 years old, he's already starting to lose limbs from diabetes. And this only gets worse over time. It starts with one toe, then two, then half the foot, and so on. We provide the medical care for the surgeons as they do these procedures. So this is the trajectory that we're putting our young people on, and obviously this happens disproportionately. This happens much more in the red zones than it does on the affluent north side. So this is the diabetes, is the huge increase in diabetes, both in type 2 diabetes, both in younger people and in middle-aged adults, is a function of the obesity epidemic. Obesity is the main risk factor for type 2 diabetes. And when we talk about diet and exercise, which are two of the main contributors to obesity, we often frame it as an issue of personal responsibility, right? You knew you were supposed to exercise and you didn't. You knew you were supposed to eat better and you didn't. So who do you have to blame for your illness? Well, that's one way of looking at it, and that's a mistake we make over and over and over again. We blame individuals for sort of mega trends that are sweeping over societies that, if you act normally, if you act like everyone else in your society, if you eat what they do, if you do what they do, then you're probably going to end up with the illnesses that they do. These are two graphs put together by the folks at the Centers for Disease Control, and they show what happened to the body mass distribution in the United States over the years when obesity exploded. The left-hand bell curve shows the bell curve of weight in the United States, body mass index, it's weight adjusted for height. And the right-hand curve shows what it was 30 years later. And what you see is the whole curve moved. The whole curve moved. This is not a problem limited to a few people who let themselves go, who have low willpower. Obviously not every individual, but if we look at the United States as a whole, the heavier people got more heavy over those 30 years. The average people became overweight. The overweight became obese. The skinny people are less skinny. Or even people who we would say, yeah, they're doing everything they're supposed to do, but it's a little bit harder for them, it seems, to do everything that they're supposed to do 30 years later. This is not a willpower problem. This is not a character problem. This is a society problem. This is an our way of life problem. And so when we think about investing, the answer for this is not found in any sense in the healthcare system. It's found in investing in creating opportunities for a healthier life, a better structure that I'll talk about for all of us as a whole. The way that I talk about it is that people embody their social and physical environment. And usually in that formulation, embody would be a metaphor, but here it's not. Okay, the conditions of everyday life as humans get written into our bodies. If you're stressed out over years and years, those stresses get written into your blood vessels in terms of hardening of the arteries. It gets written into your brain in terms of a higher risk of depression. It gets written into your behaviors. It gets written pretty much into every body system that's vulnerable. The way that food was marketed, was distributed, was available, everywhere, always, very cheaply, often very unhealthy foods. It got written into all our bodies over those 30 years. And so, as humans, basically all the things that we're exposed to have an effect on our physiology and create traces that linger. So I want to talk a couple minutes about where this comes from, not just the obesity epidemic, but a lot of the afflictions of everyday life, a lot of the struggles, a lot of the issues that people in those red line neighborhoods struggle with to this day. And this is the policy environment that we're in. Okay, if we're not going to invoke character and willpower and other sort of personal individual issues as the leading cause of these epidemics, what do we invoke? And again, I would take it all the way up to our way of life. And what shapes our way of life? Policy, laws, regulations. And I'm just going to go through some of those policy issues with you. So, one of the things that we know affects human beings deeply now, and the economists are doing amazing research on this, is the idea of scarcity. When you're living under scarcity, when you're worried about your next meal, or whether you're going to have a roof over your head next year, it affects your physiology. It affects your thinking. They've done experiments where they can give someone an IQ test, same one like you took in ninth grade probably, and then they can give you the same IQ test after giving you this scenario. They say, imagine your car is broken, and you take it to the garage, and they say, wow, this is a major repair. It's going to be $1,500 to fix it. And imagine that you don't have the $1,500. That's it. They give them that scenario, and then they have to take the IQ test. The IQ is lower because that idea of scarcity is bubbling around in people's heads. Scarcity takes up brain space that you could be otherwise using for other issues. It diverts your focus of attention to things that could be better used. So the scarcity paradigm has a lot of things that contribute to it. Obviously, we talked about capitalism and societal models of consumption. You have to have a big TV and a nice car and a house. All those things that drive consumption, when you can't afford it, put you in a scarcity mindset. Work-life balance, you in ways of favor corporations rather than the people who work for them. Examples being minimal maternity and paternity leave, a few vacation days. So, again, circling back to maternity, the maternal mortality rate in the United States is 1 in 1,500. 1 in 1,500 women dies as a complication of childbirth. Is that good or bad? Right? If you don't know, so I tell you that in Italy, it's 1 in 17,000. Okay? And that's because the experience of pregnancy and childbirth in France and Italy and other European countries is very different. Okay? It's much more relaxed in the hospital. It's not things happen as quickly as possible. When you go home from the hospital, a nurse is going to come to your house. She's going to make sure that you have everything you need. If you don't, arrangements will be made, okay, for housing security, for food, for income support. No one's left with a newborn child wondering, where the next meal is coming from. The same with worker protections. Again, many of the worker protections are given to favor of corporations. Compromised food supply. In other countries, even some countries you wouldn't think of, in Chile, for example, if a food is higher in sugar, on the front of the package in big letters, it says high in sugar. Okay? There's no rooting through an almost indecipherable nutrition label that often is, if it's a package that can fold, it's always hidden in the fold of the package, so it's very hard even to know what you're getting. But we let folks get away with that. The trillions of dollars in tax cuts that we just enacted, what is going to be the downstream ripple effects of those? Right? They're going to help people who are anti-tax and anti-social services say, well, we can't afford that anymore. So it provides a justification. Institutional racism, again, it's hard to open the paper these days without evidence of that, and structural violence. And there's so many, I have a second screen that I do. This is very true in San Antonio. I grew up in New York City, which is a completely different ecosystem, obviously, in a completely different built environment. But the amount of time that you spend, by force in San Antonio in your car, because there's no other alternative. There's a scant bus system. There's no light rail. That seems like it's I don't know, malediction to even talk about that. And then, at the bottom of all these things is the political capture by the uber wealthy and the corporations. So these are the root causes. And as we think about investing, we don't have the power to undo any of those things by ourselves. We could by banding together. A lot of the investments we might make help mitigate the effects of those root causes. But we have to have a different dialogue among us about where health comes from, because it's gonna come from undoing a lot of those policies and making something even 20% better would make a huge difference in public health. As we think about interventions, the ex-director of the CDC put together this slide. It's the health impact pyramid. And it shows different kinds of interventions and their effect on health. At the top is the one that we do the most of, probably medicine. We cajole people to eat better, to exercise more, to take their medication regularly. That's actually the least effective because it depends on the person every day, right, to make a decision to do what's right. The things that work better are automaticity, where it's structural, where it's built into everyday life. Things that happen automatically because they're available, because they're possible. And so the socioeconomic factors are what shape that. That's the base of the pyramid. It has the biggest effect if we did it. And then above that is changing the context for default behaviors. So what kind of food do they serve at school? What's in the cafeteria at your workplace? Are there sidewalks in your neighborhoods that let you work? And the clinical interventions are at the top, because again, those happen one by one, not a million people at a time. So about 10 years ago, I was looking for a way to think about this, and I came across an economist that was doing a lot of writing about it. His name is Amartya Sen. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics about 10 years ago. And he came up with this notion of the capability approach. Capability is a terrible word, but it's very academic. It sounds good. But it's essentially this idea, which is pretty simple but very profound. And this comes into the ethical arena now, which I know you all are thinking about in terms of your investing. What do we owe each other in a society as people? Okay, I can't make you have a good outcome. I can't make you live to 90 years old. I can't even make you walk if you don't want to. But what we can offer each other is the opportunities for good outcome. Okay, so the business we should be in investing is the business of creating opportunities, changing the opportunity landscape for all the things that we want to change. If people have practical opportunities to do things, obviously the people who suffer the most are the people most excluded from practical opportunities. So again, if you're affluent, you have practical opportunities to do a lot of things. If you live in those red zone areas, your practical opportunities are very, very limited. To get a job with a living wage, to have steady housing, to have good food supplies, to take a walk after dinner on a sidewalk, as opposed to walking in the street, and a whole chain of other things that flow from that. So think hard about the object, the goal, the destination that we should be thinking about is a community, a neighborhood, a city, a society in which everyone has feasible opportunities to do the things that will make them healthy. And I'll close with this. This is from 100 years ago, the New York City Health Commissioner. Public health is purchasable. Okay, by investing in all the things that keep us healthy, we can buy public health. That's a great notion for a group interested in health impact investing. It is indeed purchasable, but you have to invest in the right things. Putting more and more money on that mountain of $3 trillion for healthcare, I'm going to say, is not going to get us there. Thinking about what creates opportunities, feasible opportunities in every neighborhood, for every family, those are the investments that are going to get us there. Thank you.